Well, someone who can control what he does is Ray Dalio, billionaire Ray Dalio. He's got a new book out, and he does a lot of investing in China. And what Ray Dalio just said is pretty eye-opening, pretty shocking, and is leaving a lot of people scratching their heads. You know, he is a big prognosticator of markets. He has certainly, accurately predicted a number of major setbacks in world economies. And when Ray Dalio speaks, a lot of people listen. I certainly listen to his investing strategies and how he sees cryptocurrency and all of those things. He's a brilliant guy. But he said something that was really head-scratching when he sat down with Andrew Ross Sorkin on CNBC about China. He does a lot of business in China. So when Andrew Ross Sorkin asked him about human rights abuses, this story specifically in China, you're an investor there. Can you put pressure on the Chinese government through your businesses to demand that they do better? And here's what he had to say about this.
Transfer of wealth of sorts.
Well, okay, two things. China, transfer of wealth. I just know China very well, and I come as a perspective, with a perspective as an investor. I've been going there since 1984. I know leaders, and I know how they're thinking, and I know the moves that they're making in a detailed way. And I'm just trying to share what that perspective is, because I think a lot of people make stereotypical moves, and I think you have to really understand. First thing you have to understand, because it has been a remarkably successful place. Since I started going there in 1984, per capita has increased by 26 times. And so,
okay, so are you going to answer the question? Basically,
I've had China over for dinner a couple times. I know
we've hung
really
out.
well.
I know them. I know how they think. Well, if you know how they think, then you ought to know exactly like what The Economist reported just a few weeks ago, which is how oppressive that regime is towards stories of sexual abuse and sexual assault, and you bring that up to a boss, you get laughed out of the boardroom. I mean, you bring it up to any kind of human resources, it just gets squashed. Try having a Me Too movement in China. It's not going to happen. So we are literally seeing a moment with this story of our tennis star Peng Shuai. Like if this story, you have international business leaders saying what she is claiming is sexual assault by a vice premier of the Chinese government, you have an opportunity as a billionaire and as a business leader and as someone who does a lot of business in that country to stand up and say enough is enough. I'm going to pull my business here, or I am going to exert pressure on this. I think a lot of big companies who stand for human rights or purport to, like Apple, for instance, right? But there always seems to be erring on the side of profits, just like these businesses who are not speaking out, who stand to make a ton of money from the International Olympics in Beijing. So Dalio was pressed a little bit on this, and he was totally evasive on this whole thing, saying he can't be an expert in these types of things. Really? But you can be an expert and write really thoughtful books, like the book Principles, which is heralded as an incredible business book. Or he's got a new book out just now he's promoting. That's why he was doing this interview that looks at 500 years of world economic history. But you can't be educated about the very country that you do business in all of the time, and you know them very, very well?
It reminds me of that Stephen Wright joke. It's like he walks up to that guy and he's locking the door on a building, and the sign says open 24 hours in a row. Open 24 hours, and the guy's like, "Why are you locking up?" And he's like, "Well, it's not in a row." It's like, it's like principles, but not all the time.
Yeah, not all the time. So on this area, I'm just, I know them. I have them over for dinner, but I just kind of look the other way because I make a lot of money there. That's how it reads to me. Anyway, here's the rest of that soundbite.
So to not understand it or to approach it with a great bias is a great disservice. Okay, in terms of the element of, let's say, a transfer of wealth, or let's call it common prosperity. Yes, there's a world, in this world right now, there's a move to common prosperity. I think that that move, what does it mean at a technical level? That's not take your money away. But here, I would say what are called progressives here are much more left than what we would call progressives or whatever the Chinese policies are doing. But yes, worldwide, there has to be common prosperity, or let's call it broad prosperity. And the question is whether that's going to come about by productivity or not. It doesn't mean that you're going to have like a communism that's going to take all of that. There's going to be a lot of productivity in China. And so, again, diversifying the portfolio. You know, you look at the United States.
What is he saying? I mean, literally, like, you can tell how I'm sorry, you can tell how nervous he is. I don't see him really ever nervous in interviews, like he's got his stuff together, and he's just given a word salad. He's like, we're more progressive here than they are there. So, you know, take your money away? I wouldn't say to do that. Okay.
Say, hey, David, did you like that cheeseburger you had? Well, you know, I went and got pizza the other day, and I was thinking that if I just drove my car south on the highway, I would get down to warmer weather. But, you know, I took a right, and I ended up, and it was snowing on the mountain, and I came back home, and the kids were here, and I went and I cleaned my car, and then I took a nap, and I went to bed.
Yeah. Oh. What was my question again? I think I asked you about pizza. Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just taking you down a total. So now it's top up. Well, I don't even know what he's just throwing out a whole bunch of economic terms. We need productivity, top up this, down this, that. No, I asked you about human rights, sexual abuse. Like, you do business there. Like, where do you come down on this issue? And Andrew Ross Sorkin's like, right. Let's see if he presses him on this question.
Elsewhere, you have to diversify.
One of the quick questions I just want to ask you on China, though, is clearly there's human rights issues. There's questions right now about this Chinese tennis player, Peng Shuai. There have been questions about Jack Ma. How do you think about that piece of it when it relates to investing there?
Well, I can't be an expert in those types of things. What I basically...
I know everything. I know everything about the Chinese people. I've had them over for dinner. Well, I don't know that.
Yeah, read my new book. It's 500 pages of 500 years of world history of economics and economic troubles and why do countries collapse. But I can't be an expert in that. He starts off his soundbite by saying, I've been going to China since 1984. Okay, what more of an expert? If there's an expert on China from the United States who's done business there and who is an investor there, can you tell me who that is? Can you get that guy on the phone? Because to me, you are the guy. Like, you are the Chinese expert who's done business there since the 1980s, 1984 to be exact. But I can't be an expert in this. I don't know. I can't be an expert. I mean, how can I be expected to answer that question?
Now about this Chinese tennis player, Peng Shuai. There have been questions about Jack Ma. How do you think about that piece of it when it relates to investing there?
Well, I can't be an expert in those types of things. What I basically do, and for 50 years I invest all over the world. I look to whatever the rules are. If the government has a policy that I should do a certain thing and so on, but I can't be an expert in all of those particular dynamics of that. I really have no idea. So the guidance.
I just know I take my shoes off when I go in my friends' houses there.
Yeah, and I know that I know that they don't call it Chinese food. They call it food because they don't eat Chinese food. They just eat food. I just
sit there. Yeah, I just sit there in my socks. I eat their food with these sticks.
Yeah, they have, and I know I like the movie The Karate Kid. But I can't be an expert in this. And all I got to say is whatever their rules are, I just follow their rules. Okay. So their rules are that they ignore women's complaints of sexual abuse and sexual assault. And you're okay with that. Like that's something you're okay with.
It's like Cuomo. I'm Italian. I kiss everybody. I hug everybody.
It's what I do. I'm Governor Cuomo. I just grope people. What's wrong with that? You got a problem with that?
He's the prime minister. They touch people. What are you going to do?
I can't, I'm just like a parent. I'm just like an old parent. I can't deal with these crazy kids.
And is, the most important thing. It's, these are political. It's like, and then I look at the United States and I say, well, what's going on in the United States? And should I not invest in the United States because other things and not our own human rights issues or other things, and I'm not trying to make political comparisons. I'm basically just
You're not making any comparisons.
Follow the rules, understand what's going on and invest properly in line with those rules.
You recognize, I think that what's going on in the United States, and there are things that happen in the United States that I don't agree with, that I imagine you don't agree with, but I think that those things are different than some of the things we see happening in China. People aren't, the government isn't disappearing people, for example.
Okay. Look, you want to get into the policy of disappearing people. I'll give a little bit of a perspective of that, okay? What they have is an autocratic system. And one of the leaders described it, he said, that the United States is a country of individuals and individualism. And that's what it's about. He said in China, it's an extension of the family. He said, if you look at the word country in China, it consists of two characters, state, family. And that has to do with Confucian. And it's very much a top-down. And as a top-down country, what they're doing is that it's that kind of like a strict parent. They behave like a strict parent.
Oh, okay. So the sexual abuse, it's just like a strict parent. I get it, Ray. Okay, you're making brilliant sense. You have a friend who told you that this is how they operate there. They just, when they have these sexual abuse stories, it's just a strict parent being tough on the child. That's all it is. So look the other way. He's rolling his eyes at Andrew's question, and good for Andrew for pressing him on this. Saying, look, this is different. People are disappearing. The government is, and you're continuing to do business there, and you have the power to exert some pressure on this government to change. Right?
You think he'll be back on that show?
I don't know. He's like, I usually come on these business shows and get softball questions. That's why I come here. Because he just did an interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin like a few months ago at some conference, and it was just, a bunch of softball business questions. There wasn't really, and so now to be pressed on this issue, and he's like, oh, come on. Oh, you want to talk about disappearance of people? Oh, I didn't know I was going to be talking about that today. I thought I was here just promoting my book, how brilliant I am. Look, at the end of the day, you're selling a book and telling everyone how brilliant you are, right? It's a book about 500 years of economic history and why countries collapse. And then when asked about the sexual abuse in China, you roll your eyes and say, I can't know these things. I can't be educated on these things. So you're selectively being educated on things that matter, I suppose.
It's like it's China. It's China. She's a woman. You know how they are with women. Like,
right?
Who cares?
Who cares? Who cares?
When I'm in China, I do what China does.
Yeah. And yes, I know Mr. Miyagi's from Japan. I was making a joke about his limited knowledge of China. Someone in the chat says
Okinawa.
Okinawa. Yeah, which is a small. Is Okinawa? It's actually considered part of Japan. I know it's an island.
Yeah, it's an island off of Japan.
It's an island off of Japan. By the way, Okinawa has. There's an amazing book I read years ago on Okinawa called the Okinawa Diet Plan. It has more centenarians that live in Okinawa than anywhere in the world. People that live to be over 100 years old, like no cancer, no heart disease. It's because their diet and just their lifestyle. They treat elders with such respect. They don't cast them off into nursing homes. It's a really fascinating book about Okinawa.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah,
I actually took Okinawan Shorin-ryu was the type of karate that I took when I was a teen.
Wow. Grim says he was born in Okinawa. I studied Okinawan Kempo. So that was
we should fight sometime.
Yeah, we should. but my Kempo won't work with your style, so it'll just be a lot of me going this way and you going that way.
Yeah, and then we'll just sit down and listen to records.
Exactly. We're like, okay, we're done. Let's just listen to some Beatles records. So that's my update on China. That's my update on Ray Dalio. Just a really eye-opening, troubling interview. Like a guy that I held up in such high regard. Really, this deflated me watching this interview. I must say, really, really bothered by this. And this is exactly, I think, what's wrong when people think about big business, just turning a blind eye to profits, turning a blind eye to problems so they can continue to make profits. I don't need to see about that or educate myself about that. I'm making money over here.
If you want to see it in a way that really like makes you think and kind of touches more home than something with China, watch Dope Sick. Because Dope Sick, that movie with Michael Keaton, really shows you the measures that these corporations will take to get a profit. It's like, oh, people are getting having issues or whatever. Well, let's up the dose. Let's make a bigger pill. Oh, now they said we've been approved by the FDA to give it to people indefinitely. That means we're going to make lots of money, guys. Congratulations. You're now the president of this company because you're going to make us so much profits. And it's like, you just see in real time how these people think about the bottom line, and they do not think about, because they knew that this was killing people. They knew all this stuff was happening, and they did it anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, and they hope they don't get caught, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Even when they did, nobody went to jail.
Right. They'll continue to pollute. These big companies will continue to pollute riverways because they know that government's in their pocket, and they won't prosecute them. It's just the way this stuff works.